40 years in the making, McLaughlin Levrone shatters women's 400-meter record to win gold. A moment that stopped time. The roar of the crowd in Tokyo's Olympic Stadium was deafening. But for a few seconds, it was as if the world itself had stopped spinning. The clock froze on a number that fans, athletes, and coaches alike had dreamed of seeing for decades. Sydney McLaughlin Levrone, the American sprinting prodigy turned legend, had just done what many believed was impossible. She shattered the women's 400-meter world record, a mark that had stood unchallenged for 40 long years. This wasn't just another gold medal. This was the culmination of history, of ambition, of an athlete who dared to step where few thought possible. A record that survived generations finally bowed to the brilliance of McLaughlin Levrone. The weight of a 4-decade record. To understand the magnitude of this moment, one must go back to 1985, when the women's 400-meter record was set. For 4 decades, that time loomed like an immovable mountain. Athletes had tried, coming close but always falling just short. Sports scientists debated whether the mark was even humanly possible to beat. Year after year, names came and went, but the record remained untouched. It became not just a number but a psychological wall, a symbol of limitation. Every sprinter who toed the line in the 400m faced the ghost of that record, knowing that history was watching. For McLaughlin Levrone to not just break it, but shatter it on the grandest stage, was more than an athletic feat, it was liberation. The road to greatness. Sydney McLaughlin Levrone's journey had never been ordinary. Born in Dunellen, New Jersey, she was destined for greatness almost from the moment she first stepped on a track. By her teenage years, she was already competing against older, seasoned athletes and winning. Her breakthrough came as a hurdler, where she quickly became the most dominant 400m hurdler in history, obliterating her own world records and redefining what the event meant. Yet Sydney wasn't content with hurdles alone. She had speed, endurance, and the unique ability to blend technique with raw athleticism. The flat 400m, an event as brutal as it is beautiful, called her name. Many thought she would dabble, perhaps win medals, but few believed she could touch the record. But Sydney believed. And belief, when matched with discipline, can build miracles. Tokyo, the stage of legends. The 2025 World Athletics Championships in Tokyo already carried an aura of destiny. The stadium, filled with tens of thousands of fans, hummed with anticipation. The women's 400-meter final was billed as the event of the championship, and all eyes turned to Lane 5, where McLaughlin Levrone stood, tall and composed, her face betraying nothing of the storm within. The camera zoomed in. She closed her eyes, whispered a prayer, and exhaled. Then the gun fired. The race that changed everything. Sydney exploded from the blocks. Her start was crisp, economical, not wasteful. Unlike many athletes who panic in the opening 100m, she ran with calm precision, letting her stride open gradually. By the backstretch, she was already eating into the stagger of those outside her. At 200 meters, the memes began. The pace was too hot, unsustainable. Spectators braced for the fade. But Sydney wasn't fading. She was shifting gears. Her form, honed through years of hurdle races, was flawless. Shoulders relaxed, arms driving smoothly, knees high, every element of sprinting poetry. Coming off the final bend, the stadium rose to its feet. She wasn't just ahead. She was flying into uncharted territory. The final 100 meters were an exhibition of willpower meeting grace. Rivals strained, faces contorted in effort. Sydney looked unbreakable, her stride almost growing stronger. When she leaned at the finish, the clock froze, and history was rewritten. The time on the clock, the scoreboard flickered before confirming what no one could quite process. World record. The time was faster than any woman had ever run in history, faster by a margin that stunned experts. The stadium erupted into a mix of disbelief, tears, and wild celebration. Commentators screamed. Coaches embraced. Social media lit up like fireworks. Sydney McLaughlin Levrone had not only won the gold medal, she had destroyed the 40-year-old record that had defined the event. Emotion on the track. As the realization hit, Sydney fell to her knees, covering her face. She wasn't crying from exhaustion but from the enormity of the moment. Teammates rushed to embrace her. Fans chanted her name. The American flag was draped around her shoulders, and she slowly jogged her victory lap, waving to a crowd that knew they had witnessed history. When she finally spoke to reporters, Her words carried humility and awe. This record wasn't just about me. It's about every woman who tried, every runner who believed it could be done. I just happened to be the one blessed enough to make it happen tonight. The science behind the miracle. Analysts quickly dove into the mechanics of her performance. Sydney's stride efficiency, honed through hurdle training, gave her a unique advantage in rhythm and pacing. Her conditioning allowed her to hold near maximal speed without the typical lactic acid crash that cripples most runners in the final 100 m. Biomechanical breakdowns showed that her posture, stride frequency, and ground contact time were near perfect. Simply put, Sydney had found the sweet spot between raw speed and controlled endurance. But science alone couldn't explain it. This was a performance fueled as much by heart as by physiology. Global reaction. The world responded instantly. Headlines screamed across every continent. McLaughlin Levrone breaks the unbreakable. 40 years of waiting ends in Tokyo. Sydney rewrites the laws of sprinting. Legends of the sport like Allyson Felix and Michael Johnson congratulated her publicly. Usain Bolt tweeted, "That was insane. Sydney is on another level." Kids in parks and backyards began running their own laps, imagining themselves as the next McLaughlin Levrone. The record-breaking run wasn't just history. It was inspiration. The psychological barrier. Breaking the record did more than rewrite the numbers. It broke a mental barrier. For years, athletes lined up knowing that world record was nearly impossible. Now, with Sydney's run, the impossible had become reality. Young runners now dream bigger. Coaches now plan differently. The women's 400-meter has entered a new era, one where limits are meant to be shattered. Sydney's legacy. With this performance, Sydney McLaughlin Levrone's legacy was sealed, not just as the greatest 400 m hurdler of all time but as a transcendent athlete across multiple events. Comparisons to icons like Florence Griffith Joyner, Michael Johnson, and Usain Bolt were inevitable. But Sydney was carving her own category. She wasn't just a sprinter. She was a pioneer, a symbol of persistence, and a beacon of what happens when faith, talent, and work ethic collide. What comes next? After Tokyo, the question wasn't if Sydney could do more. It was what's left. Could she lower her record even further? Could she dominate both hurdles and flat races simultaneously? Could she inspire a new generation to pursue greatness without fear? For Sydney, the journey was far from over. "This is just the beginning," she said with a smile. And the world believed her. Why this moment matters. Sport has a unique way of uniting people. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like and share. Till next time.